Hi, and welcome to the Profit Tool Belt podcast. Today, we're going to be talking to Mike Moxley. Now, Mike and I are going to talk about understanding the business behind your business. And he's got a pretty cool perspective because he used to be a CPA. He's a recovering CPA, he told me, and a tax consultant, but a recovering tax consultant. And now he really deals a lot with the kind of businesses that listen to this show. So you're going to want to hear his perspectives on that. He also runs a company called jobcloser.com, which many of you are already using, that helps you with your CRM and billing customers and customer communication, all that stuff. So some of you already know Mike, so you get to hear him here on the podcast. Let's see what he has to say. Mr. Mike Moxley, how are you doing?
Doing real well. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Nice to see you again. You're a busy guy.
Yeah, it's been an interesting last 6 months, especially as everything changed around in the housing market. Everybody's running in more directions.
Running in more directions, worried about the future, questioning decisions that we thought had already been made. They're back on the table again.
Everything is back under a microscope for a lot of our clients. Everybody is trying to figure out where everything stands. So
yeah. Well, I mean, the good news is that's exactly what this show is about. As you know, it's about the business of the construction and contracting business. And actually, you're my guest today to talk about understanding the business behind your business. So it's perfect. You should have been on the show 299 episodes ago.
There you go. It kicked off early on. Yeah.
Yeah. But hey, that being said, Mr. Mike Moxley, who the heck are you? And how is it you come to be speaking to all these forward-facing contractors and construction pros all around the world?
So I am a recovering accountant. That's generally the response that elicits.
Yeah.
So CPA by training. I spent the first about 10 years of my career as a tax consultant, working with really big businesses that were generally buying or selling. Most of our clients were getting sold, and so we were working on deals that were ranging anywhere from 50 million to multiple billions of dollars. And so got to see all sorts of different industries. Had one client in particular that was a home builder, and ultimately ended up going to work for that home builder as their CFO.
I read that on your website. There was a yellow notepad and some drinks involved, I understand.
I definitely remember the drinks, and I think there was a notepad. Yeah, it was but we were going through it, and he was, as the owner of this company, was asking me about what I would see in all these different businesses. I was explaining the different problems that we'd come across, and I started asking him a bunch of questions about his business, and he didn't know the answer. And fast forward a few weeks later, I'm working for him, and he comes back in with that same list of questions and starts asking me. And it's like, well, I don't know. I need to understand your business. And so throughout my career, as I'd go into these businesses, I'd go to all the different key stakeholders or key players, and I'd always go through and say, okay, you're the sales guy. What do you trust? What's your numbers? What's your document? And inevitably, there's an Excel sheet. And then I would go to the operations person and say, okay, what do you do? And what's your source of truth? And be another Excel sheet. And then I go to the accountant and same thing. And so now I'm CFO of this company, and I go in, I get those documents, and sales doesn't match ops, doesn't match accounting. And as the kicker, accounting didn't match accounting. And so
because they were doing calendar versus fiscal, and fiscal is different than this, and sales was on a.
You'd like to think it was something that reasonable. This was a pretty good sized builder. I mean, they were building 400 or 500 homes a year at the time, and they're bigger now.
Okay. Yeah.
And no, it was just they'd go through and they had different reports, and they weren't necessarily matching them up. I mean, the true accounting numbers were their numbers, and that tied to their tax returns, but they just didn't have a good sense of their information.
Yeah, and that kind of makes sense because everybody's got their own. We're motivated by our job and how we're measured for our job. So sales has a different motivation than operations. Operations has a different motivation than accounting. Accounting wants to mitigate our taxes and risk. Sales wants to maximize sales and commissions for themselves. Operations is probably, thinking they're a cost center, trying to be a profit center. And so everybody's measuring themselves against a different yardstick. Is that what you were finding?
Yeah. And sometimes it's even more innocent than that. And some of it was just these companies grow, and very few companies start off with a plan to be a big company. Like, and this is where you and I talked a little bit before, and about this idea of like the business behind your business. And very few people, especially in our industry, go out and say, "Oh, I don't care if I'm a roofing contractor. I just want to run a business." No one says that. No one gets into it for the joy of the admin work of running a business.
Oh no, I hope no.
Yeah, very seldom do you find that. And so these companies are growing and they're adding on people. And in this case, it was, Susie sends out an email and everybody updates their spreadsheet. And then Susie sends out an update and half of them update their spreadsheet. And then she sends out another one and half of them update it again. And all of a sudden you've got 4 different versions of what should be the same info. And so a lot of it was pretty unintentional, but it's just you couldn't track things very well because there wasn't a place to put it.
Right. And so you found that need in the marketplace. And what made you, so you, by this point, you'd been working for these guys as a home builder, but now you're, we're going to talk about this later, but you own this company. It's called Job Closer for people who are interested. But what have you seen in that? Like, what made you do that transition? What was the point when you said, "Hey, I'm going to be a business owner and I'm going to take on the admin," which is when you go from working for a lunatic to being one?
Yes. Which was entertaining as well. So what was interesting is I kept trying to unpack this problem that the builder was having. It's like you would keep going down a layer and say, okay, well, the problem is Susie sends out this email. Well, before Susie sent out an email, something had to happen out in the field, and we kept tracing the problem back, and we're like, the problem started, a lot of the work actually starts where the work is being done. And so for a home builder, what they really needed was accurate information from their trades and their vendors, and they needed a clean, easy way for the people in the field to interact with this information. And so instead of trying to start at the back end and cramming a solution down the field guy's throat, we said, well, what if we start with the subcontractors and help the subcontractors and help the vendors and help the guys in the field, and then we're getting the information we need back in the office to make a good decision.
Let's talk about that for a second. Help the subs and the vendors, because a lot of those subcontractors are listening to this show right now. What are typical business challenges you see at the subcontractor level where they're interacting, at the coal face of subcontractor to GC or developer? What problems do you typically see?
So I think it's fair to say that our trades that with which we're interacting generally break into a couple different buckets. So I think at one side on the trade vendor, you've got these massive companies, your huge supply houses, and I don't think we're necessarily talking about them, but for that group, we try and get information out of a system really easy and into a system really easy. They don't need the GC telling them how to do their job. They've got their system. But at the other end, we've got trade partners. Some of them are actually working for a living. That's kind of the running joke. It's like
that implies that the big companies aren't, but I'll take that for the just to keep the interview going.
No, that's absolutely the idea.
That's what they say. I know that's what they say. Yeah.
So for those guys in the field that are actually working, and they're going through and they want to get paid. Like if I'm a subcontractor, I want to get paid. But if getting paid means I have to go back to the office, pull out my notebook, sit there, look through my notes, try and remember what it was I did. Sometimes we're having to communicate with a spouse to help if there's language barriers or whatever those pieces are. There's this block in getting the work pushed through there into the system so that you can get it billed and get it closed out.
I agree with you on, because I can see that issue. Obviously, I talk to people who are in that situation every day, whether they're a drywall contractor, a painter, cabinet maker, framer, roofer, doesn't matter. I talk about it every day. And then the other day it smacked me in the face. And the weirdest thing, I'm renovating a suite in an apartment building I own, and it's an attic suite. So you're going to ask me how I know this. It's 40 steps from the street up and 40 steps back down. But the sub that I have working for me kind of blew up a little bit, but we've got another sub waiting, and we had to pull out all the drywall waste from this place. So I put it in bags, and those heavy duty contractor bags, and I carried it down. Now, people listening to the show are like, oh, Dominic, Don't you know your revenue responsibility per hour? You talk about that. You talk about delegating. You talk about hiring subs you trust. Yes, folks, I do. And I don't have a system because I don't renovate 30 suites a year. And the sub that I hired, I didn't have a backup sub, but I had to get the job done. Anyways, my point is this. I forgot how hard it is to try and be on the tools when your phone is ringing every 5 minutes. Unbelievable. All I want to do is pick up a bag of drywall, sling it on my back like some hobo Santa Claus, and get down the stairs. And I couldn't even do that without texts and cell phones and WhatsApp messages. And it made me remember back to the days when I was on the tools as a contractor, how hard it is. And by the way, how tired you are at the end of the day as well, to go do the paperwork. Because you, as a larger contractor, you're trying to pay me. And I'm like, I just can't get to the paperwork. Am I wrong there? And if anybody listening thinks I'm wrong, send me a note. But Mike, that's what we're talking about here, right?
100%. And so it's how do we, and what the disconnect that existed, it's like, especially in the home building side, new construction, for your listeners that are involved in that, so much of it is so wash, rinse, repeat. Like, you're going to come out and you're going to do drywall for a house.
Yeah.
I know what I'm going to pay you. You know what you're going to charge me.
Yeah.
Why do we have to go through this whole dance? Why can't you just do the work, say you're done, I say you're done, and you get paid? And so that's what we were like, systems wise, that's what we wanted as a company, was to just cut out all the noise so that you didn't have to worry about that piece. And then from a home builder standpoint, we wanted to be the most attractive builder because we made your life easier.
Well, and builders know that. They, the way to keep a sub happy is very simple. Keep them paid.
Yep. Give them a little bit of predictability. Let them see what work they've got coming up in front of them. And so that was some of the tooling, and that was some of it. It's like, we need to make those guys that are still working for a living, kind of tongue in cheek, get them happy. And then the next step up, and what my guess is, it's probably where more of your listener group's going to fall on that kind of next level of, maybe you've got an office admin, maybe you're watching your QuickBooks, and you've got some tools in place to start where you're really starting to run a business. But how do we still make that easier? And from the builder's perspective, we're looking at it saying, okay, what can we do for that group of subcontractors? Yeah. And so it's things like change order reminders and selection. So every time a builder would go in and choose that the house is going to be painted this color, passing that information on seamlessly and making sure that the guys always have the right stuff to show up and do the right job.
Yeah.
And so really focused on that group. Those two groups were our big focus.
It's interesting that you focused in on this office admin as a key difference between, and I'm going to continue with your same tongue-in-cheek joke, and everybody listening knows that we're making that, but guys who are working for a living versus guys running a business, and you guys know what we're saying here. But it's that office administrator that starts to make sense at a certain point. And we often think, I need another guy on the tools. I just need a junior apprentice. I can't even keep the guys on the crew that I've got. How can I think about getting an office admin? But I'm going to remind everybody listening, we're in business to make money. Did I have to repeat that out loud? But I'm going to. We're in business to make money. And so an office admin helps me make money. They should. You have to hire the right one, and that's a conversation on its own. But it's interesting, Mike, that you and I haven't talked about this before, but you put that as the pivot point on the teeter-totter between being stuck on the tools and running this as a larger business that you can grow, is having that trusted admin who can help you grow this business. I'm so glad you brought that up.
It is, yeah, it's so funny, that stark line. And you see, and I've gotten to meet so many of these different guys, and like, one guy's a crew leader and one guy's running an office. And like, there's not that much of a difference. Sometimes the guy running the crews may still make more money, but a lot of times they can't get past a certain point.
So you can make because you can make short-term more money. Mm-hmm. But if you're trying to build a legacy, and a lot of people listening want to pass this on to their kids or somebody else in their family, and you don't want to pass them something broken. You wouldn't give your daughter a broken down car. You'd want to give her a good car. You want to pass a good business to your family. And so you have to have these systems in place, but there is a short-term loss where you suddenly take on this non-revenue position of an office admin. You think, well, that's just a waste of money. Why would I do that? Mike, my soapbox is asking me to stand on it. Can I?
I like it.
Can I stand on it?
I'm with you. Yeah.
and people on the show have heard this before, but if you do $1 million in sales a year, and I'm just going to pick that number because it's easy math and I don't want to count on my fingers in front of you, given that you're a tax guy. But if I do $1 million in sales a year and I work 50 weeks a year, 40 hours a week, it's approximately 2,000 hours. I know it's not. I know it's around 2020, but it's about 2,000 hours a year of work in $1 million business. That means my revenue responsibility per hour as the owner, $500 an hour. I'm the shepherd of $500 an hour of things going in and out of the business. So it makes sense for me to pay an office admin whatever the going rate is in your market, because my responsibility is $500, and let's just say the office admin is $40 an hour. Just picking a number out of the blue. We just have to get people listening to the show long enough to realize that and make that change to get the uptick.
The office admin is the first one that's in my head in this industry. That's the first one that you hire that makes it a business, and you're not just managing a little bit of
Wow. Oh, I like that. That's the first employee that you hire that makes it a real business. So it's not a crew leader, it's not a foreman, it's not a.
Well, so if you think, so my background, all M&A, right? So most of my clients were selling businesses. And if you look at a lot of these guys that for all intents and purposes are labor brokers, if you sub out the head guy with another guy, the same crews show up, the same crews can do the work, all of that's the same. When you hire that first one, that admin who is now from an office delegating those crews, filing away the reports, keeping up the information, understanding
paper,
managing all that stuff. Not to say that you can sell a person, but now you've got a business that you can start to sell. And as you've got more and more of that piece of it, there's actually something to transfer on that's a legacy. And it's not just, oh, I can call some crews and get them out there. Not to diminish that, but it's starting to actually be a business.
Yeah, and by the way, this is not the path that everybody wants to take. Some guys like being on the tools and want to stay on the tools. Although that does change when your wrist, your neck, your elbow, your back, your feet, your hips, your knees start to hurt, and you think, maybe I should have built this a little differently because now I'm running a job. Not knocking that, it's just a decision you make that at some point you got to pay for.
We have a really good client. They're not a home builder. They're in they're more of a large trade. They work in what they do. They do like 4,000 new construction homes a year. So big group. Yeah, that reaction, right? So big crew. One of the questions that the owner asked me is like, how much information do I give my crew? Because at some point they could leave and do this on their own. And then I started unpacking that with him. I'm like, okay, well, what are you best at? He's like, well, I'm best at selling. And I said, what are all these people doing here? He's like, oh, they're making sure we're paying the right invoices, we're getting in the right money, the collections aren't getting too far out, and they're doing all this. I said, okay, all of that stuff is the business. The fact that a crew leader could go out and do some houses does not replace all of the other things that you've built. Your protection as the business owner isn't that crew leader, you've got a little bit of knowledge on the crew leader. It's that you've got this entire business and they couldn't tomorrow go out and replace that. They couldn't go out and do these things.
Yeah.
And so he's insulated himself some because of the business that he's built.
Yeah. It's interesting, Mike, that he asked you that question, but I suppose because you're an accountant and you come at it from that financial viewpoint, that question comes up. But when I get that question as well, I have to remind the business owner that, imagine you're looking at like an old, you think of an old house and you're looking at panes of glass that make up a big window. Your crew leader sees through one, maybe 1.5 panes of glass, and your accountant looks through one, maybe 3 panes of glass, right? Everybody's got a couple of panes they're responsible for, but the owner is supposed to have the perspective to be standing back a little bit further and see the whole picture window. First of all, somebody has to want to be a business owner. That's the biggest constrictor of all. And then they have to go start a business. People will talk about it, but they don't go do it. And then they have to listen to shows like this to get better at it one step at a time every day. And remember to have the perspective to look back, delegate to the right people who are then responsible for their own panes of glass. I used to worry about the same thing. What if I train my top guy and he leaves? I'm like, go ahead. This is the hardest thing he's ever going to do. Go give it a shot. But your job will be waiting when you want to come back. Maybe.
And then the flip side is you're like, what if you don't teach them and they don't get any better and they can't go do it on their own? How are you ever going to grow if the other guy can't do some of the stuff to help you out?
Yeah.
You've got to have that trust to.
Yeah. What if you don't train them and they stay?
Yeah, that's always a problem.
Then you've got, the real problem. It's interesting that, from the finance side and from the operations side, you and I both have come to that same observation.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah.
I've been so fortunate on my career. Like when you're going to sell a company, like there is the tax piece of it and the structure and all that. And certainly that was where some of my value came in, but so much more of it was understand what is the value prop that we're selling.
Mm,
Because if you're selling a manufacturing company and it's a very cut and dry company, you say we produce this many widgets, our market share is this. There's not a lot of story to tell there. You can look at the financials and generally understand that. But if you go to sell a company that's in a space that's a little bit more unique and it's a little bit more one-off, you really have to understand what is it that we're selling.
right.
You can't just say I'm selling a balance sheet that has X or I'm selling a P&L that does Y. It's why is that P&L going to continue when I leave?
Yeah. One of the challenges, actually, maybe you can comment on this, but one of the challenges we have in this contracting and construction industry in general is recurring revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of the home trades businesses, like pest control or maybe even garage door guys, if they've got the right type of contracts, they can get service agreements, locksmiths, alarm monitoring. But if you're out there and you're doing farm work or framing or roofing, you do a roof and you move on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no recurring revenue. And I'm not going to pay for that when I come to buy your business. I'm just not going to, because you're a project company, which is
Right.
fine. And there's a different valuation for that. But when you see the valuations of, for instance, an alarm company or a pest control company that's got people on contract, you're like, well, I don't want to be in pest control, but the cash flow is insane.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do alarm monitoring, but that's a totally different business. What's your observation or suggestion for how people in construction can start to move towards that consistent revenue month over month?
If you can get to a point where you can predict out what's going to happen, and that's obviously hard to do, but if you can go out and show that it is really predictable by going out and saying, all right, we're in December of 2023, this is realistically what we think we can do January, February, March, and you're pushing it out 12, 18 months. Send it to your accountant, have a record that you send it to your accountant, send it to your best friend, whomever. You go through and you say, okay, we think we can do this. Yeah. And then every month you're going and you're making adjustments and performing to that. And then you do it again and you do it again. And then somebody comes in to buy your company and they say, yeah, but that's all work you've already done. But you can lay out and say, yeah, we have a method that makes ours predictable. Where every other roofing contractor on the planet only knows what's on their schedule tomorrow. We have a sales funnel that we
Thank you. I was waiting for that. Yeah.
Yep. We do all of these things so that ours isn't a guess. And within a 10% margin of error, whatever that tolerance is, we can go through and lay out a predictable pattern.
Yeah.
Now we're back to that where we've got a business to sell, not we're crew managers.
It's funny because we're kind of back to the same discussion that we had about office admin. You have to invest in something that you're not sure about the return in. I have to invest in an office manager, hoping that it's going to bring the return, and it will if you make the right decisions. But Joel, to your point here, and thank you so much for bringing it up. I have to invest in marketing. That's the top of the funnel, or it's the mouth of the beast. I've got to feed the beast, and then production is the rest of the beast, right? Like producing the work. But if I know I'm spending this much on marketing, and it's going to bring me this many leads or inquiries, that's going to bring me this many jobs. And that's going to bring me the cash flow. And then to your point, the next buyer that comes along, or if you've got one of your kids taking it over, a niece, nephew, whoever, management team, if your foreman wants to buy it, you just say, look, keep the marketing up, keep the sales up, and production will always be busy. But as soon as you strangle the beast, if you stop marketing and stop selling, of course you're going to have problems.
Yeah, for sure. And then, so once you've got that pattern, then you also need to show that you're replaceable, which I think a lot of people get nervous about. Going back to just a few minutes ago, what happens if my foreman knows the secret sauce? And you're like, what happens if they don't? If they don't, you don't have a business.
Yeah.
And so, go ahead.
No. I have a question, but keep going about the secret sauce.
So regardless of industry, I've always looked at every business and thinking that you've got these three sort of verticals. You've got the selling the vertical, you've got the selling vertical, you've got the operations, and then you've got the back office. And very few times in my career have I ever met somebody who said, I started it for the business. Every once in a while, you do get the entrepreneurs like, I don't care what the business is, I just like business. Doesn't happen very often. More often it's, I know how to do something, so I think I can do it on my own, and I know it well enough to sell it. Oh, and I've got a business to run. And so it's like, okay, we know that our major is either selling or ops, and the minor is probably the other one. And the redheaded stepchild is the office. So our first hire is to get the office handled.
Yeah.
The second hire is to help out on our minor. And the third hire needs to be the one that replaces us, so that when a potential buyer comes in, and this might be a 10-year, 15-year play, that you're building out the company that's got all of those disciplines, but a potential buyer never looks at it and says, yeah, I mean, it's great that ops runs itself and that you've got a great back office, but without you selling, the whole business goes away. So you can't be the single piece to any one of those three verticals, or ultimately it's going to be a lot harder to sell your company.
Yeah, well, it's a three-legged milking stool with one leg gone, right? It's funny that you bring this up, Mike, because earlier today I had a conversation with a gentleman that runs a very high-end custom construction business. And he said, I'm the sales guy and I don't want to give it away. And he's really, really good. But if you were to step back and have a look at his business, everybody in that shop, everybody on the field, because he's got shop operations and field operations, relies on him getting up in the morning and making the sale so that they're working for the next 3, 4, 5, 6 months, right? But he's human like you and I are. What if he gets a cold? What if he gets sick? What if he gets stuck in traffic and misses that sale? There's a bunch of what ifs. And so the risk factor to the business is really, really high. So I want to, it's so good that you're on the call and that you've got this finance background, because I want to give a message to people that I didn't think was going to come up today. I often see owners of businesses who say, look, I don't want to take a general manager level salary because that's going to burden the company. So I don't take a very good salary, or I don't take one at all. And I just make money when the company makes money. And my position as a business coach is, look, if you want to sell this business one day, or you want to get properly financed by the bank, you have to show that it can support all the positions. So Mr. or Mrs. Construction business owner, you need to start paying yourself like a construction business owner gets paid on Indeed right now. If a GM for a construction business makes 90 grand, you kind of got to make 90 grand. Mm-hmm. What's your thought on not making that money, or to put a system in place where they start to realize they need to be paid?
It's interesting, and I got two different pieces on it. First off, completely agree. I mean, you've got to pay yourself.
Because I'm not a tax guy. I was worried you're going to disagree with me.
No, so what's so funny is, skipping onto the tax one, so many people have such bad advice, get such bad advice on tax, that they make these arbitrary decisions, and they're like, oh, well, for tax purposes, I don't really pay myself and I just take money from the company. Then you unpack it and you're like, okay, but you're an LLC, and in the US, you're taxed as a partnership. It all flows out to you regardless. So either you can structure it and say, I'm going to take a guaranteed payment, to your point, and I'm going to pay myself $90,000 a year, and anything in excess of that is my equity as an owner. Great, good on me. Or you can go through and take the same money out and do it in a less structured way, and it just looks a little bit less organized, and then your personal finances aren't in as good a shape. It's harder for you to borrow money. That may be a limiting factor for you. I mean, there's all sorts of negatives that come from it. Now, I get it. If you don't have the money to pay yourself, that's a problem to solve first. But if you think that you're gaming the system somehow, you're probably not. You're probably just making life harder and making a less marketable product.
So I have a curious question. I don't have the answer in the background of this one. Let's say that, yes, I recognize that a GM in my position, running a company, would make 90 grand, but the company can't afford to pay me 90. Should I still take my 60 grand a year that it can't afford me to pay me and bank the 30 on the future growth of the company?
I mean, I think there's a long-term question. It's like, do you think every year you're adding more than $30,000 of value to the company? Because if you're not, then you probably have to make the decision of, should I just go out and be a GM? Like, so that's a question, is if you never can make that money, then that's maybe a longer term question. But as far as like banking it from a tax perspective or something like that, it wouldn't really matter unless you have partners. If you've got partners and you want to say, hey, I'm not going to pay myself and I want to set this aside and come back to it. But generally speaking, it's all kind of a wash when we're talking about these wholly owned partnerships.
I think we need to surround ourselves with good advisors. I need to. You, Mike, I imagine you surround yourself with good advisors. Anybody out there listening, surround yourself with good advisors.
And that's another area where it's hard to get. It's a hard place to make an investment. When you're starting off and somebody goes in and says, I can do your tax return for $100, or I use TurboTax. And then you've got a firm that's looking to spend a lot more. And there's a point where it makes sense to flip that switch too. It's probably not day one, but eventually it's probably worth paying for good advice.
Yeah. Well, and it's the same thing. You can go get a cheap car, but if you're going to put your family in it, your values start to change pretty quickly. Well, I don't really want a Lada with a crank start. I'd like my family to be able to get in there and just turn a key. And I'd sure like them to have air conditioning and airbags, right? You start to make, because a car is a car, minivan's a minivan, a pickup's a pickup, but you start to look at your available options. You're like, well, I could buy the cheapest truck on the market, but this suits my purposes. I need this to get X, Y, and Z done. I took us off our path. I'm going to bring us back on it.
Sure.
So you were working at a builder, but then, and people may not know this already, but now you own Job Closer and Threadcore, two different software companies that serve the industry. So how'd you make that jump from being at the builder to the insanity of business owner?
Yeah. So when I was at the home builder, we started building out this product, and ultimately it was more fun. I've always been a consultant. I'd spent a little time as a CFO and was like, I really want to get back into serving multiple clients and trying to solve problems. And one of the issues that I always had in consulting was I never had access to all the good information. So I had this idea. I said, well, if I can build this software and build consulting around it, then I could end up going out into this space and have all the data to actually help people solve problems. And so ended up getting an investor group together, and we bought out the bit of the software that was built under the home builder, and then built the two platforms and took them to market.
You kept both. You kept the home builder company and the software company.
No. The home builder company used to own the software, and then we bought it.
You bought the software from the home builder company. And that's Job Closer.
Job Closer and Threadcore both.
Two different things. So what's the difference between Job Closer and Threadcore? So
Job Closer, really, it's a lighter platform. We have thousands of users on it that can jump on. They can manage schedules, work orders. It's probably like what most of your listener base would use. That kind of, like, it ties into QuickBooks. Threadcore is a full enterprise resource platform. It is its own native accounting software.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. And so, but the connection between the two is they are built on the same platform. Like they work hand in hand. So builder goes through, issues all their purchase orders, puts through their schedule, and it seamlessly flows into Job Closer. So if a roofer's working for a builder on Threadcore, their work is in there. And then separately, they're creating their own quotes and purchase orders and stuff for the other side of their business.
But just to clarify, if I'm not working for somebody who's using Threadcore, let's say I do window installations in Columbus, Ohio.
Yep.
On my own, I can use Job Closer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I get big enough as a window company, I could choose to use Threadcore because it's is it an ERP level?
It is an ERP. Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then you could just migrate up into that. But the idea was we wanted to create these connections so that, like, it's cool as we're growing, we're getting into more and more markets, and and home builders are coming on, and vendors are like, oh, cool, they're already on Job Closer. And so now we're getting more and more in, like, markets around the Southeast. Companies are like, oh, most of my builders are on, or more of my builders are on Threadcore. So it's all together in Job Closer. And then the 50% of my business that's not related to home building directly or whatever, they're still able to run it through Job Closer.
Right. If they're doing repair, renovation work, or some other job.
Yep.
Yeah. Very interesting. It's interesting that you're doing that. There's such a need in the market. And, going back to the office admin, moving paperwork around it's a big headache. And it's not supposed to be paper anymore, by the way, which is why we're moving towards software. I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day. The barrier to entry to starting a company today is so incredibly low. I know you look like you're younger than me, Mike, but when I started in business, you had to rent an office, you had to get business cards and stationery, and you had to buy a phone system, which was at a bare minimum $40,000.
Wow.
That's before the first day that you opened. And you'd have that 4 system set from the phone company, and they sign you to this huge contract. And there was other requirements. I mean, you have to have a photocopier, all these crazy things, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't need a phone system anymore. You don't need a photocopier anymore, right? You can outsource your payroll. You don't even need an office. You can be virtual and still look great. And it's so incredible that software has allowed us to do those things, but many of us haven't realized there's tools out there that'll help us do things faster, quicker, better, cheaper, more efficiently. And we're still stuck with pushing paper when it should be on an app like yours or others that are out there. But the tools are available. You just have to go and try them.
Yeah. Well, it's so hard to find that good admin. Like that first hire is so key in that spot. And it's like, once you've got that person in that role, you can go, when you scale to a certain point, you go hire another one, or you can invest in a system, whatever that is, and you can try and get more out of that person. It's really hard. Like that first person is so key. In fact, we'll go and talk with some of the smaller companies, and they're like, oh, should I get a system like the full ERP, or should I, and maybe I can get rid of that one person. I'm like, no, you need to keep that person.
Yeah, no.
You need a quarterback.
And you can't go from 0 to ERP. You have to take the step in between.
Yeah, and there are some people, which, I mean, it's exciting to watch some of these entrepreneurs that are like, hey, I just want to do everything through technology. I'm like, that's great. Still, you need somebody. So let's find a balance. And so getting that, you get that key person, you get them a system, and a system could be a good Google Drive where everything at least lives in the same place.
Right.
I mean, just having some order to your business and then trying to grow on that and get the most out of those key hires. And then you can invest more in those key hires because you don't need 3 of them. You need 1 really good, or you need 2 really good people, and you can invest more in them and give them all the tools they need to really succeed.
Yeah. We say it on the show all the time, but a business needs to run on very, very simple systems. Simple systems are strong. They're powerful. And it's easy to overcomplicate things. It's even easier to get bogged down in the day-to-day and forget to work on this, which is why a business coach like me even exists. Mm-hmm. Right? You build a plan, you work to the plan, you just take one little step forward every week, and then eventually you've made it past the hurdles that used to hold you back. But if you just try to fix everything at once, like going from no system to buying an ERP, it's insanity. You just can't that's a cliff of learning. ERP, by the way, Mike, because you're the expert and I'm not, what can you explain to people who might not know what an ERP is?
Sure. So it's effectively, as simple as I can explain it, it's one system that should be running most all of your operations and really your accounting. And so it's where you start to really tie in what maybe you're using QuickBooks now and you're using something else to schedule, and your data storage is somewhere else. It's the idea of bringing as many of those platforms together as possible
in one software. So you've got and I don't know that yours does this, CRM for marketing, right?
Yep.
All the way to sending a deal that's closed into production, all the way to billing and collecting on that deal, and then saying nice things to the customer in between.
Yep.
Correct?
You got it.
There you go.
Yeah, the CRM is so critical. The CRM exists in both platforms. The ERP has it and Job Closer has it as well. Because I mean, that sales focus is kind of it's pretty important. If you don't have sales, you don't have business.
It's the mouth of the beast, right? We have to keep that beast filled, and that's a lot of people don't get into the trades because they're great in sales, and they might not even have a good feeling in their tummy about being good at sales. Some of you out there listening are, that's okay. But generally, people don't get into this because they want to be great at sales. Like you said, they're really good at building homes or having a vision for how a renovation can go. And then they find themselves in a position where they get to walk other homeowners or buyers through the process, but it's not their comfy place naturally.
It's like if you're not good at sales, then you're probably going back and relying a lot on like past relationships. And it's like, oh, I've worked for this person before, so maybe I can go in and get a little bit more. And whereas if you can dedicate and focus on sales a little bit, it expands your opportunities a whole lot more. Yeah.
Well, we talk about sales here. We run a boot camp. It's called Construction Millionaire Boot Camp, and it teaches people how to sell without being salesy. Because it's not. People think that being a salesperson is a natural thing. It's not. It's trained. There are steps to do it in a proper order, and if you go outside of those steps, you don't get the sale. Yeah. Mike, I appreciate you being here on the call.
Yeah.
Wait, it's a podcast, not a call. If somebody wants to find you in this big wide world, instead of driving down to Georgia to meet you, how do we find you?
Easiest place I think would just be to go to jobcloser.com and sign up there. Where you put in your information, we can reach out to you. You can reach out to me at mike@jobcloser.com. And yeah, we're pretty much always available. Fun thing about software is we're around 24/7. So
Can't think of an easier email address than mike@jobcloser.com. It's pretty hard to misspell that one.
it's easy. Yeah, that's why we go with that one.
That's a good one.
Go with anything more complicated.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate having you on the call. I really appreciate the fact that you came from the big business world and you're talking to more of the smaller, medium business world, but you're bringing all that. When I say weight, I'm not talking. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about girth.
Gotcha.
You're bringing a lot of that big business weight into these smaller, medium-sized business problems, which means you're going to have some perspectives that most companies don't have. I think that's really cool.
I appreciate that. Thank you again for having me on. It's been entertaining for sure.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Mike. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye. Well. Thank you, Mike, for joining us. I appreciate that. We got off topic there today. I mean, we did and we didn't. We didn't. I think the nice thing with Mike is that I'm able to talk to him about things beyond I built a software, because he comes to this with that big business knowledge and that perspective. We talked right up front. If you remember, I said, hey, what kind of subs do you see happening here? He goes, well, there's the big company subs. And then there's the guys that are, working for a living. And we all know that's a joke. You guys can light me up on social media if you like. Then we transition to understanding this. And I hope you picked it up. And I hope you picked it up as a question to yourself. Is it time for me to hire that office manager, that office admin? Because maybe it is. Now you look at that and you go, well, I'm not going to spend that kind of money for an office manager. What would that person even do for me? Well, just think about samples like he talked about here. Just think about talking to the people in your company to make sure they're tracking their time properly. Just think about how much time it takes you to get back to customers on time, just for that first contact to say, hey, Dominic got your message. He asked me to reach out. He won't be able to get back to you till tomorrow, but we're looking forward to getting you on the calendar. Can I help you with that right now? That moves that next deal, that next sale along. Doesn't matter whether you're doing painting or whether you're doing cabinetry or whether you're doing fences and decks or roofing or anything. You're keeping in touch with the customer is what helps you get that deal. And if an office manager can help you with that, that's fantastic. They can help you with your numbers. Here on the show, you've heard me talk about the end of a job report, understanding at the end of a job whether you made money or not. Well, what if that was your office admin's job to present you with the end of job report, the profitability? They can go find the little numbers here and there inside the company, put them on a piece of paper, hand it to you at your desk while you're having a coffee. And you go, oh, look at that. We did really well in that job. Let's do that again. Or, we did not do well in that job. Here's why. Here's what we have to change in our next estimate. There's 1,000 reasons to get an office administrator. There's very few reasons not to get one. Let's find a way. If you have questions on that, obviously, always reach out to me. Find a way to reach me. If you can't find me on social media, you ain't looking.